your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now! Here comes the jam. Getting down with the truth. The only way he knows how to. Girls all us with his name. We call him the chief. You're damn right. He's gonna get that sucker. Yo, track down the truth. You know what a track down the truth. You know what they call him. We call him the chief. You're damn right we do.
I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield. You can find us on YouTube and Rumble every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You know, we go over cop-related movies and crime movies. And today's movie, we have to honor Val Kilmer, who passed away just a few days ago. We're gonna review the movie Wonderland. Now, there's a couple of interesting things about this movie. First, it's about a true story that occurred, and the nightclub and a lot of the stuff happened in the Hollywood area, in the West Hollywood area, which both I worked and my guest, John Baylis, worked when this stuff was going on. John worked there when this stuff going on. I arrived at West Hollywood shortly thereafter. So the drug, sex, and rock and roll culture is still going on there and was going on when we were there. And the other thing is just the excellent job done by all the actors involved, and Val Kilmer playing John Holmes, which is a true life story, a true life person, you know. So it's just a interesting movie. Now, before I get into my movie and let John say hello, let's talk about the Los Angeles Mission in downtown Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Mission services the needs of the homeless in downtown Los Angeles. Has been around for about 85 years. That's just changed over some leadership. They got a new CEO, and they're working to resolve some issues there. But, you know, they provide wraparound services to try and get people off the street, but not just giving them a bed and a warm meal and some clothes. They give them services in the hopes of reintegrating them back into society, kind of completely different than the housing first model that government's been using and wasting money on for the last decade or so. So the Los Angeles Mission is doing a great job. But the thing is, you know, they make the sign of the cross there. You know, they have a faith-based element to their programming, so they don't get any government money. So go to the losangelesmission.org, make a small donation today, $25, $50, anything helps, and do your good deed for today. Now, I want to also plug my show, Briefing with the Chief, on KJDB.com. Now, last week, I did a show on how the war on cops and the pullback of traffic citations is killing people. So what I did is I went up to the federal website. I think it's National Transportation Safety Board, and I looked at their numbers. And right after Ferguson, you saw a bump in fatalities, and right after George Floyd, you saw a big bump in fatalities. I managed to identify a location, because you have to scramble to file this data. They don't make it easy on you, trust me. And I went to the Superior Court of California, and prior to Ferguson, law enforcement was writing just shy of 5 million citations.
No, get down.
Just shy of 5 million citations in California, and it dropped down to, just this past 2022, it dropped down to 2.5 million. Well, what did that cause? That caused a 43% increase in fatalities in California alone, and that pattern has occurred all across the country, even in red states, because some of those red states have some big blue cities in them as well. It isn't quite as pronounced in some of those red states, but it is there. The bump is there after both Ferguson and George Floyd, and you see the dramatic reduction in traffic citations and an increase in fatalities. Hello, Penny. Welcome to the show. Here's the other thing about that, though, is in California, they got rid of the jaywalking law. and they just try to pass a new law where they're going to have 16-year-olds under a certain weight have to ride in the back seat. And my thing is, okay, so you're getting rid of some laws that save lives. Now you're adding laws because you say they'll save lives, but you don't empower the police to write any citations anyways. So why are you passing these dumb laws? It makes absolutely no sense. But go ahead and look back at my show. You can find it at kjrdb.com. The KJ's Rumble channel or kjrdb.com, Briefing with the Chief. You can find the audio version of the show. I did take the time to find the data to show this. And, of course, I got the hot cop haters on Twitter, where you can also find me at LSD Jordan, telling me how wrong I am, or X how wrong I am. Of course, they don't do any analysis. They don't do any research. They just spew their lies and hate. And my tomorrow's show, I'm going to do on the whole Tesla stuff, all these burning Teslas and stuff like that. And I'm digging into who's behind all that stuff, who's paying money for that stuff to happen. And that includes this hands-off nonsense that's been going on the last couple of days, these protests, and who's funding that stuff as well. So make sure you watch me on Briefing with the Chief. Hey, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Morning.
So I'll give you a chance. Comment on the political stuff I just did, right? When you stop writing citations, of course, fatalities, serious injuries.
Common sense, but not. See, no politician has been accused of having common sense. But a lot of it's smoke and mirrors. Look what we're doing for you. We're going to save your lives. But it's like, okay, there's a law, but there's no penalty. So why even waste your time doing it?
Yeah,
because it means nothing. Absolutely nothing.
These are the same people that say every time a couple is over, it's racist, and we have to stop police violence, not let them do any traffic stops. Well, who's going to do the enforcement, you idiots, when you pass these laws?
Yeah.
And you say you're saving people from all this undue violence, but if you take a look at the numbers, people are dying because of this, and it isn't just that, because homicide rate's gone up, the overdose rate's gone up, and the fatal accident rate's gone up, and for a while, suicides were going up in relationship to alcohol and drugs, dipped a little bit, and then spiked back. It's going up as well. So we have a lot of fallout from these stupid policies pushed by the left that law enforcement used to have some role in, and they don't want any criminal justice involved in any of this stuff, and people are dying, and their policies to replacement are not working, which kind of talks a little bit about our movie too. So we're going to do a movie today, Wonderland. Let me prime the movie here, John. So it was released in 2003. It's an American crime drama film. It's based upon a real life story, and it stars Val Kilmer. And let's see, we got Val Kilmer, Dylan McDermott, Kate Bosworth, Lisa Kudrow, Josh Lucas, Christine Applegate is in the movie, right? And Tim Blake Nelson. So just a lot of really good people in the movie.
Eric Bogosian played the bad guy.
Oh, did he? Oh, the Eddie Nash.
Eddie Nash.
And these guys, the interesting thing for the audience today. So welcome. So we got FKHC 2005. Welcome. So the interesting thing about this, yes.
Yeah, we have a ritual for FK. Every time he appears, we have to say his name.
Which is?
But we don't. I don't have the video here. So well, everybody knows his team is here. I owe you a video. Next show I will run you twice. Your video, not you.
Well, and you might as well stay up, Martine. Martine's going to join us here, and we'll talk about the movie, because there's a lot of great actors, so you can give us some input as being a movie aficionado. But the thing about this particular movie is both John Baylis here and I worked the area where a lot of this stuff happened. So we worked West Hollywood. A lot of this happened in West Hollywood and Hollywood. The main bad guy in this movie, Eddie Nash, had a nightclub. He had multiple nightclubs, but his I don't know, crown jewel, I guess, although it sounds like a shithole according to you, John.
It was
a Starwood in the city of West Hollywood, which we both policed, and who John was working the streets when that was active, and Eddie Nash was around. And so, before we get into this, let's talk a little bit about who these folks are, so you can see who the real people are. I did manage to pull some pictures up. I think I got a picture of the real John Holmes, who is depicted in this movie by Val Kilmer.
No, I don't have a picture of him.
What did I send you? I can't remember what picture I saw. Oh, the
I
girls.
have the picture of the Starwood of Nash, the cover of the book, and
Let's go with Eddie Nash, the bad guy. So this is the bad guy, Eddie Nash. Here he is, right here. Did you ever see him in real life, John?
No.
Okay, so here's Eddie Nash. Now he's the guy that ends up getting ripped off, and then he's played by Eric Bogosian. And this guy manages to live to 85, believe it or not. But he was deep involved in dealing with drugs throughout the Hollywood area. He was involved in fencing stuff, which happens when you're in drug dealing business. And he owned a bunch of nightclubs. So he was a Palestinian, came over from Palestine with nothing, and then somehow built this criminal enterprise.
He had a little food cart, and all of a sudden he's got big cars rolling in, and then all of a sudden he owns the Starwood.
Yeah, so somewhere he had somebody behind him. Yeah, somebody.
That food had a special condiment, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
he was more focused on selling the condiment.
Well,
than the food.
he wasn't the only guy like that, though. Remember Okie Dogs, John?
Oh yeah.
They had these couple of stands, and they would sell to all these street urchins who were male prostitutes and drug dealers and drug users and burglars, and he was fencing stuff too. The owner of Okie Dogs, I forget his name, but he was fencing stuff, and that's probably what Eddie Nash was doing. But he parlayed it into a group of nightclubs. I imagine he had some investors behind the scene that we didn't know about, right? But
once he started dealing drugs, then he just flourished.
Yeah, and when we started working that, and we got let's show John Holmes's girlfriend, right? And that is Dawn. Now she wrote a book here. She actually survived all this stuff, and she wrote a book afterwards, the Road Through Wonderland: Surviving John Holmes. And there she is. She worked as a porn actress. She was prostituted by John. You can see the picture of John right there too. That's where I think I had this picture in the back. And John Holmes was known for his immense size, I guess, so to speak, in the porn industry.
14-inch schwanz.
That's it. So, and he and so he was pretty famous, but he also got hooked into drugs, ended up prostituting himself, and you can see him fall into this life of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, in which he's so hooked that he's willing to sell his body, sell his girlfriend's body, and I think do some pretty despicable stuff, because he ends up setting both Nash up and the Wonderland gang up, is what I saw in this movie. And I think I got a picture of John's first wife. This one is paid by his wife, Lisa, is paid by Lisa Kudrow. Here she is right here in real life. And I don't want to say she's stuck by him, but she was kind of the person that he fell back to whenever he was, I guess, descending too deeply into the drug culture and stuff. And she's ultimately the one that gave the tip that he was actually involved in the murders that we're going to talk about here. But the Wonderland, the title of this actually comes from the street where the house was at, in which a brutal murder of, God, John, I forget, it was four people were murdered in this address, and in retaliation for a home invasion robbery they did against Nash. And so this was what the story is all about. What do you think, John? You were at the Starwood, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We've seen a lot of people come to Hollywood, they get into drugs, and they end up in prostitution, and it's just that life, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a shame. Everybody thinks they're going to become a movie star or a rock and roll star within the first 5 minutes they're there. And next thing you know, they got nowhere to go. And you got all the pimps out there and all the con men that bring them in. And all of a sudden they juice them up with heroin or whatever. And they're stuck. Yeah,
and I think what I saw is in the movie is they do a pretty good job. They see these people descend into the drug culture, right? And we talked a little about this behind the scenes. So, hey, welcome to the show, Tom, and Power of God, welcome. So don't know the movie or the case. Hey, it's a true life story, Tom. And I worked the area where this happened. John, our guest, worked the area while it was happening. And it's based on the life of John Holmes and the ultimate murder of 4 people, in which John was in prison, but I think he was acquitted, right? Yeah, there was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was crazy in the 1970s and early 80s. Tom. And so I forget where I left out at, but yeah, they get you saw this Wonderland gang get deep into this. So I think we need to talk a little bit about this. So it was my experience, I'm sure it was your experience, is when you're dealing drugs, and that's what the Wonderland gang was doing, you end up being the fence for everybody, right?
Yep.
And these guys are fence and stuff. And John Holmes, whoever, they're all coming around to try, even when they don't have, just to scrounge whatever they can get to keep their fix going, right?
Exactly.
And that happens whether it's methamphetamine, cocaine, or heroin, right? Once you're hooked.
They even said in the movie, they said that John Holmes had been kicked out of every other group because he kept stealing from people and stealing. And this one with Ted Lanius and David Lynn, his partner, they allowed him to stay there. They didn't understand. They were even arguing about why we letting this guy stay here. Then all of a sudden he comes in with his info. But yeah, he was getting coke all the time.
Yeah,
and Lanius would make fun of him because they'd have all the chicks that hung around the whiskey and Starwood, that wanted coke, get a hit,
right.
Hey, and there'd be all these broads in there, all like, "You're John Holmes. Can I touch it? Can I see it?" And Lanius would make them unzip, and they'd all go, "Holy crap!" It's just that's why they kept John Holmes around as a party favor.
Yeah, a novelty.
Yeah, a novelty.
Novelty. Yeah.
All the other groups that he was getting drugs from, they finally had enough of him. Said, "Hey, you steal from us, you're out of here."
Well, let's roll with the first scene here, and I just labeled it John Holmes and sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of thing. Yeah, so it just kind of lays out who he was, because I think this era right now, people probably don't know who he is. I mean, I don't know who the premier porn star is, but he was back in the day freak show, yeah. And according to, he slept with over 14,000 women. He did die of AIDS too, and it kind of there's a little blip in the movie which we'll get to that talks a little about the fever going around in Hollywood there, and this is it. The first scene kind of shows him interacting with Dawn, right? So, and then he's a user, John. When you get hooked in drugs, you end up being a user, right? Which is why, because you're so hooked, and that is your priority. Your sense of social responsibility goes, and social norms just goes out the window. Yeah. See, so this is what this is. Yeah. It's all about who owes who what. And it's interesting as you go through this, and John Holmes is mixed in with the Wonderland gang and Eddie Nash, which are really two criminal enterprises that collide, right? This is really what happens. And here we are. We're talking about the time it was 1981. So that was I was just joining the sheriff's department and didn't get to West Hollywood till I just moved to LA and I didn't get on the sheriff's till 85. But you were already working the streets, right?
Yeah. Well, I went to West Hollywood in December 1st, 81.
Okay. And so so the Starwood was still open, right? And this was Eddie Nash's main place, right?
Yep.
And they had a lot of prostitution on the Sunset Strip, right? And this is interesting. So she got picked up by John or whatever, and then he abandoned her on the streets, and this is where Carrie Fisher comes in, the actress Carrie Fisher comes in. And this did remind me of Angels of the Night, that organization that went around and tried to help prostitutes, both male and female, get off the street.
Well, the lady that started that was a prostitute as a kid and was able to get out of it and started Angels of the Night. She's a wonderful person.
I think that's, although they don't, that's who I think that they don't attribute Carrie Fisher's character to anybody in particular.
No.
But I think I thought when I saw this, okay, Carrie Fisher is kind of playing that lady, because she was really the only active person out there at night doing something for the prostitutes.
Exactly.
As I recall. And she maintained a pretty good relationship with all the cops, as I remembered. So,
yeah.
And so then you see and this is really the only time Carrie Fisher's in the movie. It's just almost a cameo for her where she's trying to help this gal get off the street. And of course, what does this uh, addict prostitute do? She calls her boyfriend back, for
Well,
help.
of course.
And
But
John
he
finds
loves
her.
me.
What was that?
He loves me. He loves me. He didn't dump me here and prostitute me because he loves me.
Yeah, and that is, I don't think anybody can quite understand this, having worked the streets, how these women get so attached to these pimps. And that in reality, that's what he was doing at the time. He was pimping out his girlfriend. But the guys do that. They somehow they wait for these gals to get off the bus, come into LA to make it big. They're waiting at Union Station. They're waiting at the Greyhound bus station,
Good.
and they find them, and they befriend them. They give them a
Right.
meal. They act like their boyfriend, and then they prostitute to get them hooked on drugs, and then they prostitute. That was really it's still going on today, I imagine.
Yeah.
But it was so out in the open when you started working the streets in West Hollywood, when I started working the streets. And this is the pattern I see. Do you agree?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, for people that didn't know, in that little 2.1 mile area of West Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard was the rock bands. And that's also where the straight hookers normally were.
Right.
Santa Monica was the gay bars, both male and female, and that's where the gays did their prostitution. So just for the audience, so they understand where we're at with that. But yeah, it's one after another, exact same thing.
And this does happen to them, Tom. They come and they get hooked up with the wrong person. There's a lot of sexual predators. And this is actually the first scene we see Val Kilmer playing John Holmes, addict / pimp / porn star, whatever, all of these things. And I felt that Val Kilmer did a pretty good job in this. Now he's having sex with her in the bathroom. That's keeping him connected. But
yeah,
I think Val Kilmer did a fantastic job in this movie. I mean, I liked him in a lot of movies. I think his best portrayal was of Doc Holliday in Tombstone.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I love that movie. But he did a good job here too.
Oh, he was a great actor. He did a lot of different stuff. He did some comedies, cheapy little kid comedies. But and then he did. I forgot he had done Batman.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
I completely forgot about that.
Well, I think this one is hard because you have to portray a real life person and what they're going through, their addiction, their abuse of their relationships around them, and the vulnerabilities of addiction, I guess, and then the conniving way in which he dealt with people. And Martin, what'd you think of Val Kilmer in this movie? Had you seen it before, and did you like the movie and him?
What's the second part of the question?
Yeah, did you see this movie before, and what did you think Val Kilmer did?
Oh no, it's the first time I see it was on the weekend. But very convincing performance, especially when he's having his breakdowns, and you can see. I like how when the character is making these lies on the fly to change his statement and his position, you can see in his face, he's tweaking and how he's thinking how he's gonna change his story this time.
Yeah,
I think he did a magnificent job in this movie.
Well, it's funny because you hit on something that when you're working the streets and you're dealing with hypes that are trying to hide things from you, that's exactly what happens, right? They'll start. Remember that comedian, he would tell a lie and go, "Oh yeah, that's the ticket. Yeah, that's the ticket." Remember that? Gilbert, I think, was his name.
Gilbert Gottfried.
And so these hypes would talk to you and they would give you a story, and if that doesn't seem to be working, or you ask a clarifying question, then they kind of shift to another story. They keep adding.
Oh yeah.
because they're desperate, right? They're out there
Yep.
doing a burg, or they're out there doing whatever they're doing, and they just want that hit, right? They just want to move on to be able to take that hit and get that hit, and you're just in their way, and they just want to get away from you. Whatever they can tell you to get away from you as the cop, and for in his case, as he's dealing with these drug dealers, whatever he can do to get that hit is what you're seeing with John, and however he manipulates the conversation to get where he's going it's crazy. I mean, that's yeah, that old saying. That's why a lot of cops, hey, you see their lips are moving, you know they're lying, right? You know, just
Exactly.
you get so used to being lied to, right? But yeah, so but you like the movie, different kind of movie, huh?
Oh yeah, I like the. You have two versions of the facts, and in
Yeah,
some points, both versions overlap. But
yeah,
the movie doesn't push you to believe any of the two of them. The
yeah. I
movie
think
doesn't tell you, no, this is what happened. No, 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 no. The movie, this guy said this thing. This guy said this other thing.
the
Go.
only people who do that are the cops at the end.
Yeah.
They're the only ones say John Holmes set this up, right? All right, well let's roll the next scene, Wonderland Avenue. Now I had to look this up. So Wonderland is in the Hollywood Hills, John. So
Yep.
where it's at. So it's it had like a gated community. It looks like it was like a condo complex kind of thing or whatever, individual places. Well, there's only one truth. Yeah, that's you're right, Tom. But when you're
Yeah,
doing
there's only
theories,
one truth.
that truth is what you can prove, right? And that's because
But come on, Tom. You know me. I'm not subjecting myself, or I do not subscribe to that my truth, your truth crap. No. The thing is, the movie doesn't tell you the the truth, because apparently it never got solved fully. The case never got fully solved. So that what the, any any version that the movie would have pushed would have been just assumption or opinion.
this is so this is Dawn. He left her in a motel room, right? He's going to go solve some problems, right? And it's kind of
No,
because
no,
this is she's
no,
in.
no. He's just arrived from
Oh, just right from it. But now, yeah,
crime.
now he's watching the report of the murders, and I just need to tell you. So, David Lynn, let's see, the character, one of the characters in this, David Lynn, was kind of one of the head of the Wonderland gang, and I'll just read a little bit about him so everybody understands. Is David Clay Lynn, a biker and heroin addict, was a member of the Aryan Brotherhoods, not a good guy,
This one.
right? Who befriended Lannis, and he's one of the main guys. When the two of them were serving time in prison in 1981 at Lannis's behest, then traveled to Los Angeles. I think this is Dylan McDermott's character. Traveled to
Right.
Los Angeles and joined the Wonderland gang to assist them in running drugs. By the time the Wonderland murders, Lynn was incarcerated several times for armed burglary, forgery, assault with intent to commit rape. So this guy was a bad guy. And that's who we're talking about. Let me go to the main culprit, Ron Luenus, and he was Lanius. Say that. Okay, thank you, John. Lanius. He was he was dishonorable discharge from the Air Force during the Vietnam era, and he got into smuggling heroin in Vietnam. I don't know how much of that I believe, but this is what I'm reading, right?
Well, he got a dishonorable discharge. That could have been why, but we don't know.
Could have been why. Reportedly, at the time of his death, police investigated in California, largely in Sacramento area, had 27 open homicide cases that they believe were perpetrated by Ron. So this is where I was never aware of this until I started doing research for this movie. I was familiar with this case. I was not aware that he was considered a prolific killer. In May of 1974, he was arrested and charged with the 1973 murder of a reported police drug informant that had been killed over a botched drug deal after a key witness for the prosecution died. in the unrelated police shootout. Their murder charges against him were dropped. That year, however, he was convicted of smuggling heroin and cocaine across the U.S.-Mexican border, and he did some time in jail. California police described the blonde, bearded Ron as one of the coldest people they ever met. Another officer commented that upon hearing of his death, I suppose they will only need 2 pallbearers. I really love this quote. When asked why, he says, a trash can only needs 2 handles. So,
That's a good one.
That I know. I read that. I go, wow, that's pretty good. And so these are the guys who did the robbery. There's one more. This is William Raymond de Valrier. Did I get that right, Ron? So he was the right-hand man of Ron's and a voice of reason. Lynn's characterized him otherwise as a decent individual who would lure into his drug world, who was lured into drug world because of easy money, and indicated that he experienced periods of self-loathing for his actions during which he expressed desire to stop dealing and using illegal drugs. He was an overhead crane operator, which actually they make a lot of money when they're working, those guys. And he had been arrested 13 times in relationship to his addiction, which was part of the reason why he stayed in the gang, right? The autopsy performed on him after the murder identified numerous infection scars in his forearm, which is also typical, right, Ron? So this is who the Wonderland gang is. These are some pretty bad guys. I mean, they talk about some of the girls that were part of this crew, and they were mostly just hanger-ons for dope and sex, whatever. But that's who it was. So you got this Eddie Nash, this organized crime figure in West Hollywood, who had his own network of thugs and dope dealers and whatnot. And then you had this Wonderland gang, who were some pretty violent folks as well. And you got John Holmes moving back and forth between the two. And here's the actor you're talking about, who played in Silence of the Lambs, who played the
Ted Levine,
Psycho in Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, so that's who we're talking about.
That's Eric playing. There's Ted Levine.
Eddie Nash. Yeah, Eddie Nash.
The casting for Nash is awesome.
What was that?
The casting for Nash is incredible. They look like they were family.
Oh yeah, Bogosian. Well, Bogosian's Armenian. He's just got the same dark eyes, dark hair. He's a good actor.
Yeah, but this is so. Yeah, now they're giving a little bit of background of Nash. He's got like 20 to 25 liquor licenses, and they were after him for the longest time. I remember talking to detectives back in Detective Bureau. So I hit the Detective Bureau, probably around '88, right? The West Hollywood detectives, and they just had been. Joel Brown worked really hard to try and make cases on Eddie Nash. And he just said, yeah, it was just. There was layers of protection for this guy. They couldn't make cases against him, but they were constantly chasing him, constantly trying to get him for stuff, because they knew that the dope dealers were doing burgs and ripoffs in our area, and they were selling the stuff to this guy, and he was a big part of why crime was pretty high in the 80s and in the late 70s and early 80s and in the Hollywood area, right? Was that your experience when you started working there, John?
Yeah.
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 So, and I like how they kind of go through memory lane here. They show these old pics. Of course, they put the real actors in the old pic. There's Dylan McDermott. So, but it really, when you talk about the two different stories on this that come out, it's John Holmes' story and Dylan McDermott's story, basically.
Exactly.
Right.
And who are you going to believe?
And, when you're used to dealing with two different people who are involved in criminal actions, what do? They tell enough to tell the story, but also they tell it in a way that leaves them looking, protect themselves, or at least they look better than they really were when they tell the story, right? Which is really what we're stuck with here. And then you have the cops trying to work through, well, what is the truth, right? And which is what you're talking about, Martine. So, but what I said, the thing about what I liked about this is how all of them really portrayed that drug culture really well that was going on.
Oh yeah, they did. I'm wondering how they studied, whether they went to Angels of the Night and asked her about the stuff, or started, talking to cops, how they did their background. A lot of actors do that, to find out exactly how to play this scurvy pieces of crap.
Well, it's the days before DNA. Yep. And there would have been a lot of DNA on this thing. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and a lot of blood all over the place, which was also horrific. I didn't really use. There are some clips in the movie, but I didn't really use the real life clips because they're available online of the murders. But it was vicious. There was blood all over the place. It was awful. It was. They beat these guys to death with, I think, lead pipes is what it was, and it was
pipes and bats. Yep,
just awful, right?
The only one that survived was the female. That was, I believe, Dylan McDermott's character's girlfriend. But
the other one, the guy who owned,
it was
Lanius.
No. Yeah. One of the wives had cancer. One of the wives or girlfriends, whatever.
Yeah, that's Billy's wife. But
right.
Lanny's wife is the one that survived.
Yeah, and she managed to survive, but she was messed up for a long time.
It took a big chunk of her cranium out.
Yeah.
And all she remembered when they interviewed her, shadows.
Because
it was dark in there. They came in early morning hours. She doesn't remember a thing about it.
Yeah.
All gone.
Well, here's the other thing too, and so you're an actor and you get this script, what do you do, right? It's like, oh, okay, because I don't think I could do this stuff, right? I mean, I did competitive speaking, stuff like that, but it would be really hard for me to develop a character like these characters. I mean, and if we looked at Dylan McDermott, we've seen him in another movie, and now he plays this biker dirtbag addict, right? As opposed to, I mean, he did play a serial killer in the last one we did, but he's been and other good shows. But I mean, when I look at these parts, and a lot of these actors would say, "Oh, this is a great part because it gives them whatever depth of whatever performance." I would like, I don't think I want to do this. It's ugly, right? It's I guess I'd probably do the John Wayne thing. I don't want to do anything that's really negative and dark, because this is really a dark.
Oh yeah, it is.
A dark
What's
movie.
funny about Dylan McDermott, and I mentioned it when we did the serial killer movie, he's now on TV in an FBI series on Paramount.
Yeah.
So he gets a lot of work.
Yeah. He's a hell of an actor. Previously he was in that show of a lawyer. So
yeah,
I think he's tired of playing bad guys.
I think it didn't play in a movie, Texas Rangers or something like that too. He played he gets, he does a good job, and just for the audience, we did do the movie, I think it was Clove Hitch Killer.
Yeah. Yes.
If you want to go back and watch, that's what Dylan McDermott, and I think that was one of his best. We thought that was a really good acting job by him, although I think he did a good job here, but he wasn't. He was what do they call this when you're supporting actor, right? He's a supporting actor in this thing, and but he did a good job. Let's roll with the next scene. I think I labeled that, the address 3678. Yeah. And so we just went over who all these guys are. So here's Dylan McDermott, and he's playing the really bad guy. I got to go back and see who these guys, because I lose track of who these guys are. He's David Lynn, right? So he's playing David Lynn. Now obviously he survives, but he's the one that he has the information about the murder or the robbery and who he thinks did the murder, right? And he's the one that tips off the police. Harvey Keitel played some characters too. Actually Harvey Keitel would have been a good actor in this movie as well, right?
Oh, he's a hell of an actor.
Yeah, I did not realize that he was in. We did Taxi Driver, right, John? So, and when Robert De Niro shoots the pimp, Harvey Keitel was the pimp. I had not realized that. I went back when we watched that movie. Did that movie?
That was one of his Harvey roles.
Yeah, Harvey Keitel, and he plays kind of a tough guy, and
little shit too.
Yeah. He's not a big guy too, and there's a guy that's had a lot of good character actor roles, but then also leading roles. I've been wondering what Bad Lieutenant movie I should do. Should I do the one with Harvey Keitel, or should I do the one with who's the actor who played in Valley Girls? I can't thinking. I can see his face now. There's a couple different versions of the Bad Lieutenant out there, and
Nicholas
I think
Cage.
Nicolas
two or
Cage.
three,
Yeah. But this shows here they are. They're in their Wonderland address, and that you just see this crew, and this is not on everybody's using drugs and drinking, and partying, and this is what it was all about: sex, drugs, and rock and roll in Hollywood. And these guys made their money selling dope and fencing stolen property. So here are the antique guns, which actually ultimately lead to the confrontation between Eddie Nash's organized syndicate, I guess I could say it that way, and the Wonderland gang. And they rely, which I have no idea why they did this, they ultimately rely on John Holmes to fence that stuff with Eddie Nash. And of course, John Holmes comes back with no money, saying that Eddie Nash decided to keep him. He couldn't fence him, which that's the beginning of this murder, right? The robbery that leads to the murder. And I'm thinking to myself, these guys why would they give an addict stuff to sell to another crime organization and expect he's going to come back with the money? Why would they do that? I have no idea. This is they have to know who they're dealing with. I mean, either you go and broker the deal yourself with John Holmes, but you don't send him with the stuff. This is, and of course, obviously their minds are addled with drugs, but why would they do this? But this is, these weapons, these antique weapons or whatnot are the first part of this, and they're expecting John Holmes to sell it to Eddie Nash and come back with money. I mean, I never understood. What the hell are they thinking? Of course, I'm not a drug addict and a drug dealer, but
well, in the movie, supposedly they didn't know it was Nash. He just said,
that's right.
A Middle Eastern guy. He's got a lot of money. I've seen the money.
Yeah,
I've done coke with him. So they didn't know, supposedly. But they
to
knew
anybody.
Once they went in.
Why are you giving John Holmes anything? You're trusting him with anything.
Exactly.
Well,
what the hell are they
doing? They're all cocked up to the ceiling. They're just thinking straight, man.
But Dylan McDermott in this movie, he does dress down nice. It looks like a scumbag. He would be somebody I'd pull over.
Oh yeah.
I know I told this. I don't know if I told this story, but when I was on training, I pulled over 2 white drug dealers, and when I watched this movie, it just reminded me of those 2 guys. It was right on DeLongpre, and I was working with my training officers, and I want to see you approach the car, and I decided to approach from the path. And this is how desperate these idiots get. And they were all sucked up, as I find out later, from addiction to cocaine, but they were coke dealers, and they were in a little Datsun B210. Remember those cars, John? And I decided to approach on the passenger side. It was nighttime. We had the lights on, so they couldn't really see back, right? So you blind them. Use the lights to blind them. And as I approached, they're both looking out the driver's window, which I go, oh, that's kind of odd. I've only been out here a few months, but that seems odd where they're both intently looking out the window. And I decided to just, pull my 38, my trusty 38 at the time, and hit them with my flashlight and said, let me see your hands. And they dropped the Browning automatic on the floorboards. The passenger did. So they were waiting. Whoever came to the driver's door, these 2 white coke dealers, they were going to shoot the deputy who came to that driver's door.
Yep.
And because I went to the passenger door and I was cautious about approaching, there's no way the guy could swing around and find me quickly enough to get target acquisition before I could take him out. But that is, and they had an 8 ball of coke in the back, right? So these were definitely dope dealers. They were all sucked up, and those guys remind me of these guys in the Wonderland gang. And so here's Dylan McDermott as he's talking to the cops. He's laying out, the murder's already happened, and he's laying out who he thinks did it, right? And he lays out John Holmes. And it's funny, I do like this part here where
the one cop had no clue.
Where he says John Holmes. And he goes, John Holmes? And the other guy goes, who's John Holmes?
Yeah.
Well, he's the porn king, the porn star. Didn't know who he was, which I thought that was pretty funny. Because nowadays, his name's out there in whatever culture, but at that
Yep.
time, it wouldn't be unusual for the cop, one of the older cop, to not know. So here he is at the party. Is this the one where he makes him take it out to show? I think
Yep.
it is.
Yeah.
I think it is. And
Under extreme duress.
under extreme duress. So John Holmes is supposed to have a 14-inch member, goes to the party, and one of the gang members, the ladies say, this is John Holmes, and they make him out and take it out so the girls can see it and touch it. And this was part of the humiliation John had to go through because he was addicted. He put himself in these situations, right? Yeah, and this was part of he with these guys, they did humiliate him regularly. Charming, right? Yeah, I know. This is yeah. You have to see this, Tom, because this was actually, obviously not everybody who was into sex, drugs, and rock and roll on the Sunset Strip and in Hollywood at the time was involved in murders, but a lot of these young people came to Hollywood, ended up on the streets, turning tricks and addicted. And these predators, people like this, would get them addicted so that they could enjoy them sexually too. And that included John Holmes. He got addicted. He was turning tricks himself, and he was pushing his girlfriend to turn tricks. So, and he became a party favor, right, with these guys.
Yep.
So what do you think of the scene, John? They're playing back and forth. It's Dylan McDermott.
I think that's the only reason they kept him around. They wanted to just show him off, and embarrass him because they didn't like him. He was they knew he stole from every other drug dealer in town, and he was, ostracized. The only thing Val Kilmer did a good job, but in real life, that guy was a lot taller and a lot skinnier.
Right.
From all that drugs.
Yeah.
They just kept him around for as a party favor.
So, Martine, this is a culture that I imagine is foreign to, and that's why it makes it so interesting, the movie, right? This is a culture that is foreign to, 99.99% of society. They don't ever see this kind of stuff, but this is a true story. This does actually happen, which is why it makes it so interesting as a movie. What do you think?
Wouldn't know.
No?
I wouldn't know. I mean, it's an extreme culture, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but they take everything to extreme when you're a drug addict.
Yeah.
And the drugs were flowing freely back those days. Remember, Miami Vice was on TV. It was all about Miami and all the coke coming in. And there was drugs everywhere. They didn't have fentanyl back in those days. Or if they did, you never heard of it. It was all coke.
It was coke and heroin, and methamphetamine was big actually in Hollywood amongst
that's when
in the gay community at the time.
What they call it, the poor man's cocaine.
And this was actually, you do see them rocking it up in this, or smoking rock, but actually most of this was powder at that time, right? It was mostly powder. Yep. And they would do, what do they call it? Freebasing, right? The freebasing is you turn it into a liquid and then you ingest it, right? So, you shoot it, right? And when they talked about the one guy, he had all kinds of infections. That's because he was shooting himself up with this stuff, and a lot of the stuff had
dirty needles.
Yeah, dirty needles and impurities. Yeah, and that was how AIDS spread. So you have this. It starts in the 70s and early 80s, AIDS, and obviously you can get it through sexual contact, but a lot of people were getting from intravenous drug use. They were using dirty needles, they were sharing needles, and people were getting AIDS from it, right?
It only takes one.
Yeah, it was.
You pass it around.
you know, when I was arresting these prostitutes, and I'm thinking, and they were drug users. I just thought, all I could think to myself is, what are you guys doing to yourself? You know, obviously, you know, it's completely foreign to me because I was never an addict, but the information was out there. They're putting information out this community about AIDS and intravenous drug use, and so you have risky sexual behavior, risky behaviors relates to shooting drugs, and that's why you saw the AIDS epidemic take off like it did.
Yep.
Right. And in Hollywood, and it was really bad. Once it really took hold in the Hollywood area, you were going to calls, and there were, you know, these guys were, you end once full blown AIDS gets into somebody, man, you see a healthy guy or gal, they just waste away. They just waste away, and then they have all these sores on their body. Oh, ugly, you know, and
that's why you wear gloves.
Yeah, and yeah, well, it was before we even knew about all that stuff, right? As we're working the streets, and
then we found out, you know, we started asking them, "You got anything in your pockets going to stick me?" Some of the bastards had lied. Sure enough.
Yeah, you know, we got in the fight with this, you know, believe it or not, it was 400-pound transvestite, right? So this guy's dressed in lingerie, and he's yelling, "I want to die, I have AIDS." And of course, we don't even know what AIDS is, right? We end up in a fight with this guy, and he ends up bleeding all over us. And you don't know. I didn't know anything about it, right? And but that's what was going on in Hollywood, and that would have been probably 86, right? So, and we had no precaution. It was before they did mandatory testing of people. Before we had that in place. Remember, the sheriff put that law in place where you can request a test for communicable disease and all that stuff. Before all that stuff happened, right? And but that's what was going on in Hollywood. It was crazy. Hey, let's roll the scene, the Arab and the robbery, because this is so John Holmes is allegedly given the guns to Eddie Nash, or the Arab, and they don't know who he is, right? They allegedly don't know who he is. I think they do know who he is. That's my opinion. And he's just saying we didn't know it was Eddie Nash. And
well, but who's gonna willingly risk a hit on Johnny Nash?
I think these guys are so arrogant and so reckless and so impulsive. The money's there, the cash is there. We're going to go do it. I don't see them backing off. That is not the persona I see of these guys.
I don't know, but if you're gonna hit Eddie Nash, you know that you have to off everybody in that house. You cannot leave witnesses.
But well, you know, but it you know what's his one of the iterations of what happened as the gang is leaving, they yelled out, "Hey, John Holmes says hi," to set up John Holmes, right? So I you know I think Dylan McDermott's character here is kind of, like I said, he's whitewashing it a little bit. Oh, we would have never did this if we'd have known that. You know, I don't know. I mean, somebody who kills 27 people is not going to be afraid. You know what I mean? He just killing police informants or whatnot, or he's alleged to have killed 27 people. He's not going to be afraid of Eddie Nash.
Exactly. That's the thing. Why didn't they kill everybody in the house?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, they do know when you start killing people. They know that the trail will lead them back to them. You know, I don't know, because here's the other part of this, and when you're hitting a drug dealer for his money and his drugs and his stolen property, he ain't going to the police.
Yeah, right. But he is going after you.
Yeah. Well, I think once they shot his henchman Dial, that because it was his bodyguard and his buddies, and Dial played football. He was a big guy. I checked him out, and you know, now it's personal because you did shoot me, right? You know, it isn't just about money and drugs, right? But yeah, they're going to there. And here's the thing. Here's one part of their story that both acknowledge. John Holmes tells us in his story, which is kind of whitewashed and laid it out on the bad guys, right? And Dylan McDermott's character and Dylan McDermott's character say this, that they were going to rip him off. John knew it was going to happen, and he had to leave the back door open. I mean, the kitchen door open, right? So the back door. So both of them acknowledged that that was the plan, and that's what happened here in the movie, right? So we see our guys talking about they're gonna they're gonna hit the guy. Let's and I don't know. What do you think, John? I think they knew it was Eddie Nash. I think they didn't care. That's just who these people
Yeah, they
are.
said they didn't know, but that's bullshit. As soon as he started saying that to the detectives, they knew it. He told them it was an Arab guy. They knew they were probably buying drugs from him
Yeah.
to sell,
Yeah.
because he was selling them all over town. So they knew, but they were so hyped up, and the thing is, like earlier, you're talking about John Holmes, and he went from porn star, now all of a sudden he's murdering people, and he's pimping out his girlfriend. Well, these guys have no morals in the first place.
Right.
And then when they start getting on drugs, any little semblance of humanity that they had is gone.
Yeah.
And they only think of money and drugs and how to get their rocks off, and that's it. So
Right.
I think they knew.
Yeah. And I think they enjoyed humiliating Eddie Nash. I really do. I just I can't believe that they hadn't been to their clubs. If they're doing the whole sex, drugs, they're going to these clubs or whatever.
Oh, they've been the Starwood, trust me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't know. I think they knew, and I think part of this Eddie Nash's response was the humiliation, the fact that they did shoot one of their guys, and and I guess he would have had to respond. What do you do if you run a criminal enterprise and you get ripped off for what did it say? It was 900,000 worth of stuff. I think they totaled it up.
Yeah.
Drugs and cash
1.2 million.
1.2 million. Right. Yeah. So he's got to respond, because otherwise other criminal organizations are going to keep hitting him, right? Because they think he's weak. I think that's how they see this.
It's just like with the mafia.
But it's on one hand, hey, he kept their guns, so they're like, hey, we got to go get this guy. He took our guns, right? I think he paid for those guns, but he paid it to John Holmes. That's what I think happened.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Or maybe he took the guns to pay for.
Or John Odom. Yeah, John Odom.
Yeah, John Odom for drugs, and okay, here's the gun.
Yep. So it's to
I'll
pay
take
a
it as
debt.
payment.
Yeah. Either way, it's the same thing. Whether they gave him something or they used it to pay off John's debt to Eddie Nash. Either way, which of course means the Wonderland gang is kind of stupid for doing it, and so I think after we finish this scene, we'll go to our break, right? So, but
yeah. Just an FYI, that black guy, the bodyguard that got shot, grazed, that's Faison Love, the actor and comedian. And it's funny, the girl that Kate Bosworth that played John Holmes' girlfriend, they both played in a movie together called Blue Crush. It was a love story. She was a surfer. He was a lineman there for the NFL Pro Bowl, and she fell in love with the quarterback. So it was a cute little love story. But yeah, these guys work a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, we're talking about these guys as this scene rolls. Just so here they're doing the robbery, right? And but what was interesting. So obviously, Ron died at 37. He was killed. Billy was killed, and Joy Miller was killed. Barbara Richards was killed, and Susan survived the attack. She survived. David Lynn died of an overdose in 95 at 55. Yep. Here's our guy playing Eddie Nash. And so this is the results of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. One of the other gals in this thing, she didn't die in the attack, but she died at 57, age 57. Unbelievable. In 2006. This is what happens when you get into this culture, man. It shortens your life. Holmes died at 43 of AIDS. Gregory Dial. So here's the bodyguard that gets shot, and he dies at 48 of liver failure. Yeah, I have to believe that he was tasting some of the product there too.
Oh yeah.
Surprisingly, Eddie Nash lives till 2014, 85 years old. How do evil people live that long? I don't know.
Yeah.
But here he is, and at first it's pretty funny. He says, "There's nothing in there, and where's the rest of the money?" And he ends up giving it all up.
Well, he said it was down at the Star where they said bullshit.
Yeah. You're not going to leave it at the Starwood which could get broken into. That's why I think these guys knew what they were doing. I think they knew what they were getting into. These guys are killers. They don't care. I mean, this guy's a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. He doesn't, he doesn't care.
I'm just surprised they didn't kill everybody.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand, because it wasn't out of the goodness or the kindness of their hearts that they let them live.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's I like I said, I remember some of my coworkers talking about this, the folks and detectives who had worked the streets in the 70s and early 80s and now were detectives, and how hard they tried to make cases on Nash, and that he was connected. And there was some level of political corruption going on too, meaning people were getting paid off. And just ignoring all of the violations at these different clubs, because when I worked the night car at West Hollywood, I was actually going in and enforcing some of the code violations, just telling them to clean up their act. And West Hollywood, but they had since incorporated. At the time, this was unincorporated area, so it was county area, and it was a little, kind of wide open town, so to speak. Because it was, county was big and they had other things to deal with. They weren't really paying attention. It really fell on the sheriff. Sheriff should have been cracking the whip, but I think some politicians were getting their palms greased, so to speak, back then to ignore this stuff. Anyways, we are halfway through. I think it's time for a quick break. Martin, are you ready to roll with the
Yes,
commercials?
sir.
All right, we'll
So
see
we
you in
have
2 minutes, guys.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Where they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then. There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Where they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
So we got a question. Hopefully, John, where's Johnny B? Hopefully he's coming back here. He's got a question from.
He's back.
He's back. We got a question from Tom Baker. Was New York as bad as L.A.? I would say yes. New York was bad, just bigger scale. I would think. And just think of Times Square. And the thing about Times Square is Times Square wasn't what it is now back in the 60s and 70s. You know, New York went through a really rough patch there, and Times Square was where you had a lot of peep shows, you know, a lot of theaters just showing prostitution,
Homeless.
homelessness, you know, a lot of streetwalkers working the Times Square area. And I think we did the movie Taxi Driver, and it kind of shows what was going on in New York at the time. So I would say New York was just as had just as bad of stuff going on, just bigger scale in LA, right?
Yeah, and they had rock and roll places. They had Studio 54, which was a den of really debauchery. You had CBGB or something like that. You ever see the T-shirt says BC or CBCG? That was another bar, rock and roll place, and it was a lot of this.
Yeah, and I imagine a lot of big cities had little pockets of the, you know, because this was when we talk about the Sunset Strip. Just for clarity, this is where acts were going to try and get discovered, right? And if you were in the industry, either music or acting, you wanted to be seen on the Strip. Even when I went back to work there in the early 2000s, same kind of thing. You know, I mean, Hugh Hefner used to go there every Saturday night. He was out with his collection of girls, and people were just out to be seen on the Strip, and that's what you saw. And I would say that the drugs, when I went back in early 2000s, it was there, but it just wasn't as prevalent. They had gotten rid of a lot of the seedy motels on the Strip. They redeveloped all that stuff, but you still, even in the, you know, the top tier hotels, prostitution was happening. Girls were working the bars. You know, it was a little different, a little more undercover. But yes, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll was still happening. It just wasn't as overt as you saw in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. You kind of agree with that, John?
Look at the Whiskey A Go-Go.
Yeah,
The Whiskey A Go-Go was a place, if you got in there and got seen, you're probably going to get if you're any good, you're going to get a record deal. And Motley Crue had been just starting, and they were in there. They lived right up, you know, that's where San Vicente ends at Sunset, and then it becomes Clark. They lived up and to the right in an apartment building on Clark, and we were getting calls there all the time. We had one woman that was mad because one of the guys did her last week, and she was in love, and she caught him with two other broads. She put her foot through a plate glass window. The muscle of her foot was hanging out, you know. But you go through their house, and they were doing drugs a lot, but we couldn't find any. But the floor in that apartment building was covered in cigarettes and beer cans. You did not walk on the rug at all. You were walking on all the crap on top of the rug.
So the name Motley Crue was actually appropriate then, right?
Oh, very. In fact,
okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Vince Neil lives here in Vegas, and he's doing.
Oh, he does.
Revamp. Yeah, I saw him one day a couple years ago, and at a restaurant over in Summerlin. And I said, "Hey, remember when I arrested you and Nikki Sixx, and you were with Joan Jett and Lita Ford?" And he goes, "Dude, I don't remember those days. I did so much drugs." Because there was a fight involved. So I figured he remembered. He goes, "I have no clue, man."
Well, how was he though? He probably chuckled at you. You remembered him, and
yeah, he was actually a little embarrassed. Like, "I don't remember, dude. I was too high then."
Yeah, well, like I said, it's one of those places everybody wanted to go be seen, and you know, and the girls were just throwing themselves at these guys, at these band folks. And
have you seen that movie?
If you had coke, they were throwing themselves at, you know. So it was who had coke and who was famous. That was it, in both, right?
Yep.
Right.
Well, they did a movie on Motley Crue. I can't remember the name of it, and it depicts all the debauchery and all the drugs and everything else. It was pretty intense.
Well, he was a good singer, but he was a big user there.
All up were.
Big user. Well, let's start with the scene dance for me, because this just kind of reinforces just how low John Holmes goes, because he pawns his girlfriend off on Eddie Nash, I believe, right? And
he said it was his cousin.
Oh, did he? Yeah.
He says, yeah, this is my niece or my cousin. And she had to fake being her cousin, being his cousin.
And she really doesn't want to do this. Well, it's hard for me to believe, because if you read her history, she did work in the industry, the porn industry, and she was a user herself. You kind of see that when they leave her. He leaves her in the motel for 3 days, and she's kind of looks like she's going through a little bit of withdrawal. There is what I saw in that scene. And so maybe she's less innocent as in this scene as projected, or maybe she's feeling betrayed by John, because John's making her do this instead of going out and making the money so that she doesn't have to do this, right?
Yeah.
But this is the reality of an addict, right? And then you saw the scene where he's done, like I really love you and I can't believe I'm doing this kind of thing. I don't think so. He's just thinking, when's the money coming so I can get the coke, right?
Exactly.
That's so, because we really don't know what he was thinking, and maybe this is Don just telling the story. And it's funny, you guys, one of you guys said, well, how do the characters learn this? So they actually, Don and John's wife, is it Susan? They actually had become friends after John's death, and I don't know if they were living together, but they had a really tight relationship and communicated regularly and were friends, and they ended up being consultants on the movie. John's wife, is it Sharon? Yeah, I think it's Sharon, right? And then
Sharon.
And Dawn, right? They ended up being consultants on the movie, which is probably why you had a good idea of just how despicable John had descended as he got hooked on drugs here, right? But dance for me. So this is like I said, John, this is typical, right? For these ladies and guys, young men, to go to Hollywood, think they're going to make it big, and they end up turning tricks on Santa Monica Boulevard as well, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, and I remember I went to this call, and it was a young guy. I want to say he was, I don't know, 16. He's sleeping in the alley, and he had worked his way from Ohio by taking care of men all the way to West Hollywood, and he was turning tricks on West Hollywood. And I said, well, are you gay? And he goes, no, I just needed to escape home, and this is the only way I can afford. And he got hooked on drugs, of course, so he's turning tricks to support his drug habit. And but this was the reality for people who go to Hollywood thinking they're going to make it big, or whatever they're going to do, or rub elbows with the beautiful people, is how I used to say it. And here he is. He's, I'm sure he has feelings for her, but he's scrubbing her clean, and I think this is just let me cleanse you of all the bad things I had you do. That's what this scene was about. But I think it's manipulation by John, is what I see.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Martin, what do you think? Sells his girlfriend for sex, right, and drugs.
Yeah. And then he has a change of heart. While she's being used, he's all guilty. Oh, why I did it? Oh my God, no. I'm so sorry. Maybe he was, but not enough.
Yeah, no. Because he would do it again the next week if he needed.
Yeah, but talking to her that way, she believes it, so she'll stay around. But he's going to just do it again to her.
He just loves me. If I could just change him, if I could just fix him. Too many men and women spend their lives trying to fix their partner instead of realizing if they want to get fixed, they'll get themselves fixed and get out of there. So here she is, and she's coming to talk to John's wife. And I think
Ex-
well, no, I think she was still
Yeah,
married.
they were still married. Yeah, but she knew he was just a dirtbag.
She wouldn't have anything to do with them, and she ends up having a confrontation with him. I think that's the next scene where she,
Mm-hmm.
the John's wife. I got a scene called John's wife where she tells him exactly why she won't have anything to do with him, and it was interesting conversation that she had with them. But the relationship between the two women is interesting because she's in a relationship with him. I think John's wife Susan looks sympathetically down on Dawn here, and wants to help her instead of which tells me she loves John, but she's past the romantic notion of John. She sees him for what he is, a scumbag, and that he's dragging this young girl down as well. And if she's going to help anybody, she's going to try and help the young girl. Which it does ignore the fact that she's also an addict too. Dawn is also an addict, and they have to sometimes hit rock bottom before you can actually help them.
Well, that's the key. Same with alcoholism.
Yeah.
Most alcoholics don't get better until they hit rock fucking bottom.
Yeah, I heard somebody explain once, say, alcoholics will always point out the person that's doing worse than them, or drug addicts. Oh, well, look at that guy. He's worse than me. I'm okay. Which is actually pretty true.
No, that's true. Well, we had one in our department at West Hollywood. And
yeah.
He couldn't get off the booze. And he was a sergeant, had an accident on duty. He was drunk. And then
totally dying on a down level. You got to explain that one to me. I don't know, Tom.
He got demoted. Went through all the stuff, had like a couple months off, and got demoted to deputy. And they brought him back to West Hollywood, which we thought was a mistake. He lived in Santa Clarita. He was really a nice guy, actually.
Yeah, I remember him.
But the booze took him, and he couldn't get over it. And it got to the point where finally I was working. I had to take him to another police department to have them do the breathalyzer. So we kept it not us doing this, but up and above. And he ends up getting fired. And he goes to Vaughn's or something. He trips, breaks his leg. He's laid up at home and didn't do shit. Guys would go over to his house, mow his lawn, try to take care of him. And he ended up dying. Just dying, drinking himself to death. Some people never get better.
Yeah, I remember that.
That would be rock bottom to me. But
yeah, oh yeah, that would be rock bottom. Yeah, and but sometimes they don't get to rock bottom because it kills them along the way before they.
Yeah.
Right, and all right. Well, let's roll the next scene. I think I got this listed as John's wife, and I think the actress here does a good job of playing the I've had enough. Right, here she is. She's lived with this bullshit for a long time. She obviously loved him at one time, got married to him, but she's had enough of him, and doesn't go along with any of this stuff. And he's coming back to manipulate her to help him. And right, and that's what this is.
Into witness protection.
Yeah, so he's already talking to the police and saying, and he wants everybody else to follow him into his drama of witness protection, and she ain't doing any of that. She's not part of this. And but I just loved how she wasn't strong enough to completely cut him out of her life at the time. And let's see, 1984, Debbie Downs killed her 3 kids to be with her lover and blamed it on a black man. Yeah, I remember that. Was this the one where they pushed the car in the water at the lake or something like that? Yeah. Okay, I do remember that now.
Wow.
And so she, and I like what she says is, I don't want a fresh start with you. I mean, she says this, and and then he says, and this is an interesting thing. Well, why haven't you divorced me yet? So he does. they have a connection that is an unnecessary connection. She maintains this connection by not divorcing him. So I don't know what she expected from him. And but she then asks him a question. You know, why won't? What did I tell you when you started doing what you're doing, when you started doing porn? Anyone who sells their body is a whore. And she said that to him as he started in the business of the
Yep.
porn business. And that's when she started breaking. She broke it off with him. And so this is, so you know, he does have a point. So this is an interesting relationship. You know, she can't let go, and he needs her. He manipulates her. She allows herself to get manipulated to a certain point. She absolutely does. But they're stuck in this dependent, codependent relationship. That's what this is. But she can't let it go. And he, of course, won't let it go, right? Because she's the constant in his life that continues to help him, even after he's done awful things
Right.
to her, right? And I denigrated and humiliated her, right, John? The dependent, and codependent, right? That's here, right?
He's doing this the other woman right in front of her, you know, and making her a coke addict and a whore. You know,
Right.
It's total humiliation for her. Fortunately, she got out of it eventually and became a speaker, wrote a book. But you know, she was big on in the book on trafficking, domestic violence, and being under the influence.
Yeah, and she says it in the scene here. Do you remember 15 years ago? To remember what I said to you. So he starts in this porn industry thing, and now he's in this deep life of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And she finally says, "You remember what I said to you 15 years ago in the bathroom?" And that was the comment regarding anybody who sells their body as a whore, right? But she didn't let him go. She didn't let him go, and he kept coming back, and she kept letting him back. And I don't know what she expected, but now she's saying, "No, it's over with. I'm done."
Well, how many domestic violence cases have we arrested people, and the next day the wife comes in, beat the shit, drops charges with the DA, doesn't want to testify. I mean, he's my love. Or when you're arresting him right there at the house, she jumps in your back because that's her meal ticket you're taking away.
You know, it's interesting, as he says, he's the one who repeats what was said. You know, she makes him repeat, "What did I say to you? You said anybody that sells their body for money is a whore, right? Anybody sells her that." But did you see how that interplay is? They're looking at each other, it's real intense, and then he puts his head down and he says it, right, Martine? So he actually he feels shame, he's showing shame, and this is what makes Val Kilmer a good actor, right? He's very good. He knows how to portray the emotion at the time. I can't look her in the eye. She's right. I did sell my body for money, and I should be ashamed, and I am shamed, and I'm ashamed in front of the person that stood by me for all these years. That's what I saw in this scene, Martine. What do you think?
There's so many things wrong in that dynamic. He's got a point that when he asks her, "Why haven't you divorced me?"
Yeah,
and you can see there's a fair exchange of guilt and shame, because she still loves him, but she's ashamed of that feeling, because she knows this is a no good man. How can I love a no good man like this?
What is it?
I think the thing that makes her reach her limit is the thing that when he says, "Come into witness protection with us."
Yeah, with us.
Yeah,
me and Dawn.
Yeah, be a thruple.
Yeah, and she was, "I'm not going to abandon my family forever just to be with you."
what's that mean for me?
Exactly.
I just think it's a good interplay. It shows the dependent and codependent relationship between the two of these, which and I think I've heard this saying and I kind of believe it is she's in love with the person she thought he was, not the person he is.
Mm.
She's still thinking of that person she fell in love with, and that's what she thought he was, not what he is. And she took her quite a long time to figure out, no, you're
Domestic violence does that.
yeah. This is the ideal that I thought he was. This is who or her, this is what I thought she was, and she's not that anymore. So I'm in, and it takes them a long time to get there. Let's roll with the next scene. Talk to Nash. I mean, so this is like I said, I think that John Holmes set Nash up because I think he expected to get some money out of those guns. Instead, Nash probably took him for other debts, right? And he's mad, and he goes back and he sets Nash up. He says this stuff to a very volatile gang, the Wonderland gang, and by the way, is it true homicide doesn't actually mean murder? Well, there's justifiable homicide. I think murder.
Negligent homicide.
Right.
Yeah,
Homicide,
murder implies that there was no justification for the death. Homicide implies that there's could be some legitimate reasons
literally, homicides translates into the death of a human.
Yes.
Or
murder.
killing a human.
Right.
Now, the nature and the intention of the killing is what it makes an assassination, a murder, a negligent act, an accident. So homicide doesn't translate automatically into murder.
Yeah. So there you go. We got an explanation. So yeah, the two are different, and from a legal standpoint, murder is not justified any standpoint, just any way. But homicide, killing of a human being, justifiable homicide. When police officers kill somebody in the line of duty and they follow all the rules and everything, and it's justified, that is still considered a homicide. It's investigated as a homicide. It's just determined to be justifiable. And when self-defense is still considered a homicide. However, a homeowner's defending his property and is considered self-defense, it's a homicide. Investigated as a homicide. However, if they're fully justified, then it is a justifiable homicide. So here's John, priming these guys up. I think he purposely he was mad at Eddie Nash because he got no money out of those guns. He was hoping to get money.
This is John Holmes' version to the police that
exactly. Yeah,
they forced him.
They forced him to help him, right? Yeah. No,
one of the key points.
Go ahead,
John.
John.
One of the key points is when David Lynn had said when he went to the cops, he said, "We were there in Wonderland and fucking John Holmes drew a map of this place."
Yes.
And then Holmes says, "Well, they made me go with them. I was going to unlock the back door and the kitchen door, and in the car, David Lynn makes the map of the place."
Yeah, well, he was making the map of the house he hasn't seen from the inside.
And he's never been inside before.
Right.
So the cops dropped the big one on this one.
Yeah. So so obviously, obviously is, and it's funny because they got the one guy, they got the vice cop detective who had a relationship with John Holmes asking the questions instead of the robbery homicide guys. And you could hear the robbery homicide, "No, keep pushing. He's going to break," and he doesn't. And I kind of agree because we have the hindsight of, we have the knowledge of what actually happened, and we know that. I just think John Holmes knew exactly what he was doing when he set up Eddie Nash. I think he was mad that Eddie Nash didn't give him any money for those guns, or enough, or whatever. That deal didn't go the way he wanted it to go. And he had money, and he was thinking short term. Yeah, let's go rip this guy off. And because I'm helping the Wonderland gang rip off Eddie Nash, will get a big piece of the action. That's what I think is going on here. he's pushing these guys to do it. He knows they're crazy enough to do it. I think they all knew it was Eddie Nash, in my opinion. And then when they do it, he doesn't get the money he wants. He doesn't get enough money, right? And then he turns around and sets the Wonderland gang up. That's what I think happened, and that's where the cops, I think, eventually came to as well. What do you think, John?
Oh, I agree. He knew what he was doing. He's a devious little shit. But yeah, the whole thing was just. And then when they went to court, they finally went to court, and that was all a clusterfuck. MC Gainey played the vice cop, and he could have pushed more. He took everything with a grain of salt. It's like, why am I even here? And he liked John Holmes. Oh, John wouldn't lie to me. Too many of those old cops that don't think outside the box.
Yeah, well, and then how many, how much information has John given him in the past that panned out, right? So he's thinking about it in that way. But for me, man, if they're an addict, their lips are moving, they're lying, right? So you have to.
Yep.
If he tells me a story, I got to verify it in other ways before I believe it, right? And then the other thing is, well, what's the end result, right? The end result is all these people are dead, right? And we're going to find out that. Somebody had to get him in that gate to get to Wonderland too, right? So, and I thought it was interesting, this is real life, right? So Holmes he gets the kitchen door open for Nash, so they can successfully do the robbery. He draws the map for him, and then when Nash is going after the Wonderland gang, he's at the intercom and he's using his voice, or he makes sure the gate is open, the door is open.
Yeah, ajar.
The crew to get in, right? That's so two things. He's doing the same thing. His,
Yep.
At least that's his story, right? We do come to find out he was probably he was in the office, but that was his story. I only did this, which is typical of a crook. I only did this much, which is typical. Go ahead, Martin.
That I like that part because he makes to them what he did to Nash, but he says that was precisely Nash's idea. That was part of his punishment. You are going to do to your friends what you did to me.
Yeah. And I think I think his bodyguard was because Nash wasn't there when this happened, but his bodyguard was, and I think his bodyguard was pissed that he was shot, right? And because they did try to they did put Nash and Dials on trial, and they were acquitted. They were acquitted, and they tried to prosecute Holmes as well, and they did get Nash on. I think they got everybody on other stuff, but they never got him on murder. They tried to go after Holmes. I forget what Holmes ends up pleading to, but obviously he ends up dying of AIDS. And but he does set up the Wonderland gang, which let's roll that, the setup of the Wonderland gang. So we see him here. It's he actually goes and he's walking through, and I think this is his story, right? He goes through and he's talking. Yes. He's and he goes there and he buzzes his way in. And he talks to him, and then he ends up leaving the door ajar. And they reluctantly let him up, right? Now that in my mind, after they did their robbery, they should have just let John go, man. Hey, you're off on your own, man. Good luck running from Eddie Nash, but not have any contact with him. But
they didn't give him much of a cut, that's for sure.
Yeah, and he was, and we got to talk over that. So they get 1.2 million. Some of it's drugs, so they got to sell the drugs, but they give him a small amount. And their comment was, well, you weren't there, John. You stayed home with the girls, which is pretty funny. You stayed back at the house with the girls where we did the man's work, right? And so they didn't give him a big cut. And he was hurt. He was angry about that because he's a drug addict. He needs the money to maintain his habit. And he set him up. He expected to get a big payday, and he didn't get a big payday. He just got a little bit of money. And this is where at the beginning he leaves his girlfriend in the motel and he goes and he does all this stuff. He he ends up setting up the Wonderland gang. Yeah, people trust you more when you're a celeb. Look at Robert Blake. He got off scot-free. I think he was guilty as hell. Yeah, I think so too. I think there were some weaknesses in that case, but I do think it's harder to convict a celebrity. I mean, well, let's look at the latest one. What's his name? That nutcase Baldwin.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I you know, yeah. Hey, how you doing, Ariel? Yeah, it's so. Yeah, Alec Baldwin. I think he knew obviously it wasn't murderous, but it was reckless. What he did was reckless, and it resulted in the murder of
negligent homicide.
Death of two people. He knew better. He'd handled guns on set for a long time. He didn't follow all the protocols. He was actually in charge, so he wasn't like some newbie. And things were going on set that were reckless and dangerous. I think he was guilty, and I think he had some really capable lawyers who managed to get enough doubt in there that the prosecution could have moved forward with the case. But that happens. I mean, look at O.J. Simpson. I mean, he clearly killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, and they got off because he had the dream team, calling Flea Bailey, right? So that's not that I would think that John Holmes is a celebrity of that stature, but he did have some name recognition at the time. But in this case, he's still telling his story here, but he did set these guys up.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. He sold out Nash. I'm just looking at my notes. He sold out Nash, and then he sells out the Wonderland crew. He has no loyalty but to his addiction. That's what everybody needs to understand. He's about himself. Whether he was a good guy before he got into porn and he was addicted, I have no idea. But now he is all semblance of values and normality are out. And I think it was vindictiveness on his part against the Wonderland crew because he got a short payday instead of having a big payday. He had something big, Sanders. I don't know. Could you tell us by experience or whatever? But yeah, but yeah, so these guys screwed him on the payday, and he's getting revenge. That's what I saw, right? That's what you saw, John. What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree.
That and the constant humiliation.
Yeah, the humiliation. Yeah, you're right. And I don't know. Sometimes you get in that life and you get this attitude. I remember I arrested this dope dealer, and I had a trainee that wasn't my trainee. I was working overtime. I was a detective. I walked down the alley, and I would think it was at Fuller, right? And I parked the car at the end of the alley, and I said, "All right, we're going to walk and see what happened. Why these people are hanging out at the corner." And sure enough, it was this dope dealer. He was selling meth. He had a bunch of baggies of coke and meth in his hands. And the guy that just bought some had some. I could see it. They were just doing a money exchange. And the guy in the corner was his lookout, and he had meth on him. So they all went to jail, right? And that guy said, "I'll never go to jail again," the dealer. And he ended up trying to run over a deputy sheriff about 3 weeks later. And the deputy defended himself. And now that guy went to he was killed. He died in that shootout. But they get into this drug culture and they do stupid things. I'm never going to go back to jail. I'm going to fight it out with the deputies. And they get it into this drug culture and they do dumb things. And I see that with John Holmes, thinking, I'm going to take on these dangerous folks. I'm going to screw them over and I'm going to come out ahead. That's what his brain is addled with drugs. So that's why I think this is happening. And that's why I think Val Kilmer just does a good job. And then he continues to try and manipulate the story all the way through. What do you think, John? That does happen. People get addled with drugs and they do dumb things.
Oh, right? Absolutely.
And his manipulation, he's going to try and manipulate the cops as best he can. He manipulated the Wonderland gang. He manipulated Eddie Nash. He manipulated his ex-wife. He manipulated his girlfriend. and that's who John Holmes was at the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think,
You know, if you're going to have sex with 1,400 women in porn stuff and men too, the guy's got no morals, no nothing. He's just all about him and his addiction.
yep. Which is what
Whether
happens with
addicted to
addicts.
sex or addicted to drugs.
This is why. So we're kind of doing an honor for Val Kilmer here. So this is why I really think again I got to go back to Tombstone being Val Kilmer's best, the best role he played in my mind.
It was well written, and he did a phenomenal job.
Did a phenomenal job, but I also think he did a pretty good. Now, some people will say when he played Jim Morrison in the Doors,
Never saw it.
I just think this is. I mean, he played this destructive, despicable person, vulnerable person very well in this. So that's why. Plus, it's a crime movie, so that's why I did this movie. But I don't know. What's your best Val Kilmer movie that you role that you think Val Kilmer played, John? What do you think?
Oh, well, definitely Yellowstone, but I also liked him in Top Gun. He was the one you were all pissed off at in Top Gun till the end, because he's just a smarmy, I'm better than everybody else kind of guy. But that's how pilots are in the Navy and the Air Force. They just think their shit don't stink.
Yeah, let's see.
But he's an excellent actor. Did a phenomenal job.
So you're saying Tombstone, best role when he was in Tombstone. I don't have a red flag in my house. I think he was asking that Ariel, but you know what I do have in the other room is after 9/11 there was a famous painting painted by Palm called Unspoken Courage. And it's a picture of a firefighter with a small kid in his arm, one that he's holding hands with, and they're looking at the American flag. And the debris from the World Trade Center buildings are on the ground. And I have a copy or what do they call that? A print? John, they call it prints, right? A print of that painting is in every firehouse in New York City. And I have that in the other room. So, because I liked it so much, even though I was never in the fire service, I liked the sentiment so much. It's called Unspoken Courage. The artist is Palm, Pomm, and obviously this show that I do is about police. The other show I do, Briefing with the Chief, is about public policy regarding law enforcement. So, my new studio, which used to be my wife's work space, is shaping up with the American flag and the blue striped flag. Hope that helps out. All right, Martine. So I just want to. So despicable guy, but Val Kilmer, best role in your mind as being a movie aficionado. I know this is the first time you saw this movie, so it's got to be the movies that you know of, right? So what do you think?
There must be an echo here because it's Tombstone again.
Tombstone, yeah. Yeah, I'm your Huckleberry. Yeah, he was great, and the fact that he lost all that weight to fit into that character to look like Doc Holliday, who had tuberculosis, I think, as TB, and which made him thin and sickly, and yeah, it's got to be that. Well, what'd you think of his portrayal of John Holmes, though? Did you think this was a good job by Val Kilmer?
Well, I have no idea how John Holmes was, but his portrayal looked consistent to the behavior of a person of that lifestyle.
Right. It was despicable. Let's see. I got another. Let's see, Ariel. Let's see. The image of a flag over a World Trade Center rubble, is that basically an image just on? Well, it was a water paint. It was a watercolor thing. You have to look it up. Unspoken Courage is the name of the painting, and it's by Palm, the artist, Pomm. So if you actually Google that and it comes up, you'll see it. So I do honor my brothers in the firefighting, brothers and sisters in the firefighting service. Although I will say that I think they have an easier road of it politically than cops. They probably won't ever agree to that, but that is exactly what's going on. Well, let's roll the next scene. I think it is a mysterious fever, because I do need to talk about this. I know we touched on it a little bit. You'll see the scene. It says this. They kind of use newspaper flashbacks to kind of give you a hint of what was going on at the time, and obviously this is John visiting his wife again,
yes.
and you can see he's a little reduced. His appearance has changed a little bit, and in one of the newspaper flash things, it says mysterious fever. Well, that was the beginning of AIDS. That's how they kind of talked about it. Mysterious fever. I think it was cancer amongst the gay culture, gay community, things like that is how they talked about it, and it telegraphs how John Holmes is going to die and what's going on, and actually the result of his hedonistic lifestyle. What happens to him is that he catches AIDS, and you don't know whether he got it because he was having sex with men, or just the multiple sexual partners he had, or intravenous drug use. But he definitely, that's what he died of at 43 years old, which is incredibly young. And
all of the above.
All of the above, right? Yeah, so he's it's telegraphing it, and I'm kind of glad they put it in there, because it was, man, that was a big deal when I hit the streets in '85. It was just starting to take hold. People were scared. There was fear, and they still had active bathhouses going on.
Oh yeah,
in just adjacent to West Hollywood's area. So they were in LAPD's area, where guys would go and have sex with strangers, right? Now you can see you can see in this picture his appearance is changing, right? I think that's why they did that, to show that he's sick now, right? They don't really outwardly say it there, but that's what I saw in this film. And that was an important part of the time, John, right? Is AIDS taking an impact and impacting the drug culture, the free sex culture, and people started pulling back because of fear.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Here is the night of the crime in question, when he gets back to her house.
Right.
Again, because anytime he gets into trouble, she's the one who helps him.
Right.
And the way they did it in this scene is he was covered in so much blood, he had to have been one of the killers.
Right.
From, cast off and splatter and blah, blah, blah. But you don't know. I think the directors wanted to show that it really was him that was involved in it.
Yeah, and this is the scene where he actually confesses to his wife, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that you're right, and she's thinking he's injured.
He confessed, but immediately walked it back, because he said, "No. I left before the killing,
but I'm all covered with blood."
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're it's all splatter kind of pattern blood. I think there's enough forensic TV shows now that we all splatter is different than just having blood on your clothes, right? Splatter means you're there when the blow happened, whether you're swinging it or you're not. And this is where it comes out that there was one palm print found on I think it was the headboard, and which would indicate that the person who left it there and the position that was left there probably was striking the person in the bed, right? So that John, and I would not be surprised, because we've seen it with gangsters or multiple people are doing the crime, where they make everybody participate, so everybody's equally guilty, right, John? That's not unusual.
Oh yeah.
Everybody's got to shoot. So if I go down, if you're going to inform on me, you're also equally involved.
Yeah. And, so that way you won't inform.
And here's the other part, though. He didn't like these guys. They humiliated him whenever they felt like doing it, right? As Martine talked about. So he didn't like them anyways. And so, and they cut him out of his cut, his big score. I mean, 1.2 million. What did he get? A few thousand. And so he was mad at them anyways, right? Now his story is that I left him before, or I left before it happened. I didn't even see him on the street. But that's not true. And you see this in this scene with his wife, where he's cleaning her, and she realizes, hey, there's no mark on you. Whose blood is this? And yeah, he always comes back to her. You're right, Martine. So what'd you think of the scene?
Man, I don't know, because
Now, the one thing
they
about
played like they force him to hit one of the victims. I don't know if he was forced. I don't know if he was willing. And the shock he's displaying here could be consistent with both, because
Right.
he hasn't killed before. So he's either he wanted to do it or he was forced to do it. He's in shock by doing it. However, he still has a little light of mental acuity to say, I'm incriminating myself. I'm gonna change my tune.
Yes. Yes. And what I think the part about this scene in the movie is, remember, they used his wife Sharon and Dawn as technical experts. So this part of the movie, I think we can say, is pretty accurate. Meaning, he said this to her, and she's just, you know what I mean? Because it's like anything. How do I know what's true, right? So I go to those sources that have credibility, that have never lied, and she seems to be, she and Dawn, after the fact, as they consult for the movie, have no reason to lie. I mean, John's long since dead, right? John Holmes is long since dead, and so why does she has no reason to lie for him, right? And so I do believe that he was there. I do believe, given what you saw on the shirt, that he was involved. And yeah, you're right, Martine. In the end, he went right in the manipulation fold. Oh no, I can't admit that. That's going to be bad for me.
There. Oh no, I left before anything happened.
I left before anything happened, but I'm just covered with blood.
Yeah.
I do believe he went back and looked for drugs in the place. I do believe that, yes, because that is what somebody like that would do. But yeah. So I think this is a good scene by a couple of good actors. And
had she at the time testified, they would have been able to put him in jail and Eddie Nash.
Yeah.
But you saw what happened with Eddie Nash in the trials. He got, the first one was a hung jury, 11 for conviction, 1 for acquittal.
Right.
And it turns out, they find out later, that he had paid off that juror, Eddie Nash did.
He did?
Yeah. And then they do a second trial, and it's 12-0 for acquittal. So they were kind of stumped. But then they got him on other stuff. From what I understand, what I was reading about is they got him for trafficking and something else. And supposedly he admitted that he paid off the first juror. But so that's when they finally put him in jail. But yeah.
Yeah. But
he
why
only
pay
got
only
a few
one?
years.
Buy the whole jury. I mean, why are you paying only one?
Well, you only need one to get a hung jury, right? So, and
Yep.
that's all it needs. And then the but well, we saw that. We saw that with Gotti, and we saw that with other powerful crime figures. They find a way to corrupt the system. And but he did end up going to prison. The amazing thing is he got out and he lived I don't know what kind of life he lived afterward, but he lived till he's 85 years old. It's crazy.
Yeah, from what I understand, supposedly he became sedentary and just stayed out of the business. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's what I read up on.
Yeah. So this is the last scene, I think, Martine, right? And
Yes.
it just shows them going off in the
It's
sunset. But
the aftermath that we're going to
yeah,
see
it's just
next.
Holmes and Don's fled to Florida under assumed names, but ultimately they did try to prosecute Holmes for murder. And he was acquitted of the charges, but he was in prison for a long time, and he died of AIDS in '88, which is that sex, drugs, and rock and roll stuff that was going on. Those folks that were in that in the late '70s and early '80s, that was a hazard. John Holmes and yeah, so there's. Then it also talks about. See, David Lynn served some time in prison, but he ended up dying young too. So there was the trials
overdose in
against.
'95.
Yeah, the trials against Eddie Nash and his co-parts, they ended in acquittals as well, right? So and Lynn, and that's a tough part. Lynn is your top witness, and he's a despicable person as well, a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. I mean, what are you going to do, right? So the Wonderland murders is just a famous murder case in L.A. because of all the different people involved, and I think the inability of law enforcement to really hold anybody accountable. The viciousness. I mean, I didn't use any of the pictures that are available online, but the viciousness of the attacks, the blood, it's just amazing how bad it was, and then the delve into the drug and sex and rock roll culture by these folks. I mean, it just all that was on display. That kind of lifestyle was on display when I was working in Hollywood and when John was working in Hollywood, and it's true. This is what it was like. Any last thoughts, John?
Nope.
No.
Miss Kilmer, he went through a hell of a lot with that throat cancer.
Oh yeah, Val Kilmer. Yeah. It was good when they did Maverick, the remake or whatever, that they included him.
Yeah, I felt the same way.
And
Tom Cruise made sure he had a part in it.
And since he passed away, Tom Cruise made some positive comments about it. So there obviously there was a positive, and those guys, a lot of those guys are the same age. They came up competing for parts and being in movies together for the last 40 years or so, right? So, and obviously there was a healthy relationship between the two of them. They obviously cared for each other, because Tom Cruise he was a much bigger star than Val Kilmer, but I would say Val Kilmer's a better actor. That's just my opinion of the two.
Well, you talk about Tombstone. At the same time, Costner came out with Wyatt Earp. And Dennis Quaid played Doc Holliday.
And he did a good job too.
He did a great job, but it's just, you kind of got to give it to Kilmer. Quaid did a great job. He was emaciated and he was coughing, and he really played up the sickness well and his accent. And he did a really good job acting in it. But I think the writing was better and the acting was a little better in Tombstone with Kilmer.
So, yes. Yeah, well, it seems to me the thing in the world of porn and drugs is usually entwined. Look how many porn stars die of overdoses.
Oh,
that's actually true. And yes, he was in The Saint as well. I think Val Kilmer was in The Saint, and a lot of good stuff. So unfortunately, good actors, die young a lot of times when they're in that culture. Obviously, throat cancer kills anybody, right? So, but I do, I think Val Kilmer's left a lot of a good legacy in films that we'll enjoy forever. And I'll have to look for one down the road to do on Val Kilmer again. Martine again. So, last thoughts on the movie and Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer will be sorely missed. Yeah,
I agree.
He gave us so many good performances.
We won't. Yeah, we won't see. You know how lots of times older actors, as they get past their leading man roles and they become really good character actors. Yeah, we'll miss Gene Hackman. I've done a movie with Gene Hackman. We did The French Connection. Another terrible loss. His wife died, of Yeah,
Tom,
the stuff-
we
yeah.
already did the 7-Ups.
We did the 7-Ups too. That was actually a great movie too. Oh God, Tom, you're bringing up a lot of the movies that were fantastic movies that we already did. But yeah, so Val Kilmer didn't get a chance to just slide into those character roles in his older age, right? Because he's he got sick and then he's passed away. So yeah, I'm glad that we did the show today. I appreciate you guys joining me, and I think Martine, we are. Unless you got any more comments, we are at the end of our show.
Have a blessed day, guys.
Yeah.
See ya.
I'll be traveling. I'll be traveling next week, Martine, so I'll have to go on a hiatus again.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Enjoy.
In Tennessee. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well,
take care.
Take care, everybody.